Hi, I'm Dr. Carl Lee. I'm the medical delegate for the Supercars Championship Series. Today we're going to go through the safety and medical systems inherent in our supercars these days, and we've thankfully got access to Nick Percat's car to go through some of these features. The first thing that I always teach the medical teams is that when you approach a crashed car, you've got to be mindful of all the dangers. Here we've got a live car with an engine that's running, potentially a fuel tank full of 120 litres of fuel. We've got to make sure that the car is safe. So I tell the medical staff, if they see lights on here, pumps running, LED lights on at all, then they need to make the car safe before approaching it. These are the safety switches on supercars. There are two of them. The first is the blue triangle, which in motorsport means battery, and the red lightning flash means isolation. So if we pull this little lever here, this will disconnect the battery from the rest of the car, minimizing the risk of spark, ignition, and flames. The other button is a red E and a white circle. That's usually a button that's protected by a shroud. If I was to push that button, that would release a powder extinguisher inside the engine bay as well as inside the cockpit to quell a fire. Now that battery switch is quite easy to reconnect, however that extinguisher is a one-way trip. So if you push that button, that means a lot of hassle for the team to clean up the inside of the car. So generally you do not push that button unless there is a risk of fire in this scenario. We have specific windows that are removable. So these little cutout here are mandatory in all of our supercars, so that it's a deliberate grab handle. If I pull that hard, it will release these Christmas studs, then I can lift that window out to access that driver and or to access the indoor pull handle of the driver there. Once we open this door out, the next great feature about our supercars is that these doors are removable. They're not super heavy, they're only about 12 kilos. If you remove the door pins here, you can then lift the door off and we can move it right out of the way. And the advantage of that is that now we've got plenty of volume here to have a look at our race car driver there. The next thing that's going to stop us from getting to the driver is the window net. Half of our cars still have window nets, however, as you know, the race seats have been moved right into the middle of the car and back behind the B-pillar. So half of our car now use FIA safety nets, which we'll show you as well. But to remove this window net, there's usually just a single button that if you push it, it will release away, and then now you can actually see the driver. Here's an example of an FIA net. And again, you just pull it with one hand on the red lever. The next thing that's going to prevent us from getting to the driver is the steering wheel. So all of our steering wheels are removable. So if you take off this cannon plug and pull the O-ring back towards the driver, then it'll release the steering wheel. Once you take the steering wheel off, we've got great volume here now to help get this driver out of the car. I always recommend if we take anything off the car to put it up on the roof of the car, because then everyone knows exactly what stage you're up to in the rescue there. The next thing that's going to stop you from pulling that driver out is the safety harness. We'll run a standardized 6-point safety harness with the buckle down between the two crotch straps there. The buckle will be sitting at 6 o'clock position. If you turn it 90 degrees to 9 o'clock or 3 o'clock, then it'll release the other 4 straps to then access the driver. Before that driver can get out of the car, there are actually 5 other things to be disconnected as well, 3 of which are up in this B-pillar area. There'll be a communications plug, a drinking tube, and a cooling duct that goes into the helmet, either into either cheek or on top of the helmet. Additionally, with the cool suits that we run, there'll be 2 tubes that come out of the left abdominal area, which just simply disconnect to be able to disconnect that out of the way. So now we always teach that there are 3 types of extrication. Thankfully, the most common one is self-extrication. Usually that driver will be able to get out themselves. If you've ever watched a supercar driver getting into the car, you'll see that they really have to contort themselves to get into that car. If they can get out of the car by themselves, then that's much safer than us trying to manhandle them. So 90% or more of the crashes that we see, the driver will get out by themselves. Even when they get out by themselves, if we see that the front of the car is missing or they're complaining of neck pain or other injuries, then we follow our normal protocols, put a spine board up to them, transfer them by ambulance as necessary. But if they can get out of that car themselves, self-extrication, that's the best way. The other 2 types of extrication are described as being a fast extrication or a full programmed extrication, where there's no time criticality about the situation. So if that driver has potentially a fractured leg, then we do what we need to do, immobilise and get them out safely into a safe environment. A fast extrication is basically when the scenario fails Dr. ABC, which is danger, response, airway, breathing and circulation. So if for some reason this scenario is dangerous because there's fire or the car's sideways on the middle of the straight, then the priority is to get that driver and yourselves out of danger as quickly as possible. And if they're unresponsive, they don't have an airway breathing or circulation, you cannot do effective resuscitation inside the cockpit. So it's much better to get them out, leave their helmet and harness on, get them out into the back of an ambulance before you start resuscitation. So that's a fast extrication. To simplify driver rescue further, I've been developing a new process which I've called the 3-on-3 extrication system. 3 rescuers pulling a driver out on the count of 3. It replaces both full and fast extrications. So if a driver is unable to self-extricate, then I would perform a 3-on-3 extrication. With the 3-on-3, I've added straps on the back of my race suit. I use a strap attached to my left shoulder to go around the driver. I immobilise the driver's head and neck with my left arm holding their helmet and harness to my own helmet. Depending on the car, I may also use a driver slider board. I hope that you found this informative, and I look forward to seeing you at a racetrack.